All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Julia Burke. We're at Boedecker Cellars in Portland. I want to thank Stuart and Athena for graciously letting us use their space today. A beautiful space for this interview, so thank you to both of them. And Julia, thank you for being here with us. Really appreciate that.
It's such a pleasure.
The first question, as you know, to get you rolling is why wine?
Why wine? I got into wine by accident. I feel like a lot of us did. I was in college. I think was given Oz Clarke's Introducing Wine as a gift. I was 19. I'm not sure what that person was thinking, but they were totally right because I started reading it like, wow, wine has geography and politics and a lot of things that I'm really interested in. And I would send my mom, I feel like I can say this now 15 years later, I would send my mom to the store to buy like two different, I'm like, we have to taste a Chilean Sauvignon Blanc and a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc together and we'll notice a difference. We're gonna notice that they taste different and that's gonna be cool. And so I was really kind of exploring wine, with my parents at an early age. And then I went wine tasting, and it was actually the end of the day. The winery was about to close. It was my first time ever wine tasting. It was in my home region of Western New York in Niagara Escarpment. And we did a tasting. We were talking about the wine, and they actually just offered me a job. They were like, do you want to work here? First they offered me some of their, they had 1989 Gevrey Chambertin. I was, by the way, 21 at this point, I should clarify. This was a few years into my wine journey. And they were drinking some like 99 Louis Jadot Gevrey Chambertin behind the counter, just the two of them, because they were closing up for the night, and they let me have some of that. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool and unlike anything I've ever had in my life. And that's when they brought out the job application and handed it over the counter. So I really fell into it by accident. I was majoring in Asian studies at University of Buffalo and had no plans to get into wine, but I started showing up all the time. It was a small family winery, much like so many of the ones here. There was always something to do, vineyard, production, events, tasting room, all of that. So I learned a ton, and then all of a sudden I realized that as soon as harvest ended, I wasn't going to have any hours because, again, small family winery. So I started emailing wineries in South Africa and Australia and New Zealand. And I got back 2 offers, and reminder, I had no experience. I had worked one harvest. I'd been working in the wine industry for like 3 months. I was like, you know what, I can lift things. I got a sense of humor. I work hard, I don't need a lot of sleep, there's that. And one of the offers was in South Africa, and they were really all about an educational experience. I had the opportunity to be there for almost 6 months. It was a really long, really involved internship. Only 2 of us would be interns, and that was at Blauklippen in Stellenbosch, and I thought that sounded like an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And you can imagine after doing that and spending 6 months in beautiful South Africa, I was pretty hooked on wine as a thing. I did spend a bunch of years mostly in journalism, editing, writing, a few different jobs there, but I never really let go of wine. I either had a side job in retail, or I was showing up at night in Niagara to go work harvest and help people out there, or just enjoying wine, doing some bartending, and in, about 2015, I realized that I liked writing a lot for fun, and I didn't want it to be the reason I made all my money. And I loved wine, but I was totally fine with that being my job. I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved the social aspect of working in the wine industry. The community was incredible. I wanted more of that. So yeah, that's kind of how I made the decision to make it my entire life. It was a bit of a process.
You mentioned being interested in kind of wine as a topic to start with. I'm curious about, once you started doing the work, what was appealing to you about being in the industry and doing the work?
I loved the physical work. I loved the manual labor. I loved the camaraderie of being kind of sleep deprived and having something bigger that you're all working towards together. I love when you work in journalism or marketing, a lot of times it doesn't really feel like you have something that you can show. And I did this, I made this. And wine is not only that, but putting something in front of somebody and saying, this is where I'm from, or this is a place that I love. And that was pretty spectacular to me to be able to go from this kind of hard work and the labor and the day-to-day and where everything, the finished product feels so far away, and then to also be part of the telling telling of the story and watching somebody's face when they taste that effort. That was pretty special to me. I've always really loved just like hard work, and I don't mind long hours. I like, the camaraderie of working harvest and everybody fighting over the Spotify and the, even like digging out tanks. When I was in South Africa, they gave me a shovel as a parting gift because of enjoying digging out tanks as much as I did. And yeah, I think it's that combination of being sort of the behind the scenes person and doing all of this tough work that's very, very like day to day. And then also, I've been lucky enough that I've been able to be part of the bigger picture and the storytelling piece.
So tell me about, you mentioned South Africa, tell me about that kind of what did you'd worked in one spot before that. What was different about your second experience, and what did you enjoy about that experience specifically? Well,
it was definitely a trip to go from, Niagara escarpment, where frost is a constant concern. It's, as we all know from this year, it's starting to become one here too, but this is New York State, where that is just constantly a conversation, where people would question whether we could ripen, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon. Spoiler, yes, we can. But cool climate, truly cool climate winemaking, and then go to South Africa, where the concerns are sunburn on the grapes, or you decide to stop trying to figure out Celsius to Fahrenheit because over like 45 degrees you just don't want to know. And these kind of like efforts to make sure that you're getting freshness, and Stellenbosch has a lot of really good cooling influences, so it works, but it was a completely different climate. So that was the first thing. It was, I love my home region. It's beautiful in a very different way, but I've probably never been anywhere more strikingly beautiful than Stellenbosch in South Africa, when you go outside and the sun is rising on a mountain range, and you're not even that far from the ocean at that point, and some of these regions you're right on the ocean, and it's a pretty amazing place just physically. And everything was different in terms of, the people. Niagara is a bunch of families with, their kids doing a lot of the work, and Stellenbosch was an established wine industry where there were whole crews and teams, and Blauwklippen in particular had a kindergarten on site and English language classes and all sorts of things for their staff, which was really cool. So it was amazing to see, this is what an established wine region is like. This is what it would be like to have a career in this field, and you don't have to be born into it. You don't have to have, your parents started a winery. So that was pretty mind-blowing too.
What about your wine education? Obviously, at this point, it's still fairly informal. You're kind of learning on the job. What were you learning, and what were you finding most exciting about as the world of wine was opening up to you?
I loved the science. I loved being able to, as a harvest intern, do labs and learn about the numbers. Doing vineyard sampling was fascinating to me. I was really lucky in both places, both in Niagara at Freedom Run, and then at Blauwklippen, that I was allowed to and encouraged to learn about actually what's going into the decisions being made. And at Blauwklippen, it was all native fermentations, which was really interesting. And I was learning about what are the reasons for that? How do we manage that? It was, I had endless questions. People were really patient with me, which was great. I was really there to learn in every situation, and I also got to do some tasting and visiting other producers as well, so I was able to learn from them too. I was blogging about it at the time, and I'm really, really happy that I did, because at the time I had this blog, and this was back before the wave of everybody having a blog, but I just kind of wanted to not have to have the same conversation with 15 different family members and friends, when I got home. So it was a way to keep all my memories in one place. And now, I'm a Master of Wine student, I really need examples all the time, and it's so nice to be able to go back and read, and granted they're old at this point, but go back and be like, oh, I wrote down all of the technical procedure, why they made all these decisions and why they did these things in the vineyard. That's actually really helpful now. So I was really trying to get as much as I could out of every single day.
So you talked about sort of 2015 being kind of a big turning point for you. Tell me about what you were thinking at that point and what you kind of wanted to do next.
I knew that it was time to get an actual wine education because while I'd had all these great jobs and learned so much, I realized that there were gaps. I had started tasting with a great group, and I was living in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. There's a fantastic group that I was tasting with for a little while, and their global knowledge was excellent. And I already knew that I had some gaps in my knowledge. For example, I worked big box retail. I worked at a larger retailer in Western New York specifically, where in my job interview, they asked me to name my favorite wines of Spain. They did a lot of business with Spanish wine. And here I am about to work for a major retailer. Spain is such an important, region in the store and in in our market. And I could not name a mainstream Spanish wine region off the top of my head. And I just said, Bierzo, because that was the only one that I could think of. My interviewer was like, you are a nerd, wow. And the truth is that I couldn't have told you at that point, like a major Bordeaux producer. I couldn't have told you a major Rioja producer. But I was drinking a lot of Bernarda and Mencia, so there was a lot of just kind of weird stuff around the world that I was drinking and enjoying. But I wanted to pursue a full-time wine job, and I really needed to get an education and fill in my gaps. So I went and got my Wset level 3. And then took a job as a wine buyer in Chicago, and I loved that job. I loved my boss. He famously said to me at one point, we can't have an all cab franc business plan. So that should give you an idea of how much education I still needed on the global world of wine, but it was a great learning experience.
So tell me about the Wset experience for you. You mentioned why it was important. What did you get out of it, and what did you at the end of it, how did you sort of feel you had progressed?
It was amazing. I went to the Napa Valley Wine Academy, so this was the whole level 3 in just a few days. It's a very intense couple of days, and I knew right away that I was going to discover a lot of gaps in my knowledge. I already knew that they were theoretically that they were there, but to go through all of the major world wine regions and also to learn how to taste. Over the years I had been in wine at this point, I developed my own vocabulary for how I tasted wine, my own way of understanding wine. I have ADHD, I have a little bit of synesthesia. I did not have a globally recognized way of talking about wine, which is of course what the Wset is all about. And while that was a real challenge to learn how to speak about wine that way, it really clicked for me that if you taste a wine and you write down a description and hand it to someone who is not tasting that wine, they should have a pretty good idea of what it is from what you just said. That really clicked for me. And I could see the importance and the value of it. And I also remember one of the instructors at Napa Valley Wine Academy started talking about the MW program, and I had heard of it and I didn't really know a whole lot about what it entailed, but I knew I wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. And I asked a question about it, and I was sitting in the front row, and he said, I can see it in your eyes, you're gonna do it, you're gonna do that program, I can tell right now. And 7 years later, here I am, so Genjay Alton was correct. But it was fantastic, and I knew as soon as I started doing my level 3 that I wanted to pursue diploma. Mm-hmm.
So we've had a few people in our interviews talk about that, but tell us about the leap from level 3 to diploma. What does it entail, and what made you decide that you needed to do it?
Yeah, each of the leaps in Wset is pretty significant. I was briefly a Wset instructor at Linfield, and I can certainly say that the level 2 to level 3 leap is very significant, and tends to go from people who have maybe not worked in wine or not worked long in wine to people who have worked several years in the wine industry. And then with diploma, you're looking at something that is really quite a time commitment over at least 2 years. You're looking at something where you really need to have a supportive job and home environment in order to get it done. There's so much studying. It's really important to have a tasting group. When I started diploma, I was in Chicago, and I was tasting a lot because I was a wine buyer, but I did not have a tasting group. And that idea of having, a study group, and also just, people who are also pursuing the same program, so we're all tasting in the same way, we're all learning how to talk about things in the same way. I didn't have that in Chicago. Chicago is a very SOM-focused town, at least at the time, I'm not sure now. And so I noticed a big difference in how much I was struggling going from Chicago to when I came to Portland in the middle of the diploma program, and suddenly I had a tasting group with other people who were also in diploma, with a community that was really aware of the Wct program and really recognized it. It was a game changer for me. I went from I didn't pass my Unit 3 tasting the first time. I had to retake it. And then the next unit I sat was after I had been tasting with my group in Portland for 6 months, and I got passed with distinction on my next tasting. So you can see the benefit of being around other people and just tasting the wines that are going to be on the exam instead of just tasting, cool natty wine in fun bars in the Loop, which is what I was doing a lot of.
Well, before we get you to Portland, I'm curious about your experience as a wine buyer, because that's obviously an interesting kind of step in the path there. So tell me about your experience doing that. What made you kind of take that opportunity, and how it went for you? What you kind of took away from it?
Yeah, it was one of the happiest times of my life. I had a great neighborhood in Chicago where this store was. It was called Untitled Spirits, and my boss, Jaron, the owner, was just amazing. He told me in my interview that he was interested in helping me pursue my education goals, and he did in many ways. He was incredibly supportive, and I had this incredible set of customers, all like locals in the neighborhood, who were just interested in trying interesting stuff. I mean, sure, a lot of them had their taste and their wines that they liked, but I mean, I hand sold every bottle in the store, and I could get to know people, and I could taste wine and say, okay, what customer is going to drink this? It's such a key skill for a wine buyer, and it was just a really good opportunity to build those skills of just being able to assess quality really quickly, being able to assess does the price point reflect this wine? Does it reflect the neighborhood that I'm in? Like, are people going to go for this? And also, okay, in what occasion am I going to sell this wine? And it was just fantastic. I loved, like I said, my customers, the neighborhood, the coworkers and staff, and I never looked at anything the same way, because once you've been a buyer, you're really kind of like thinking about, you're always thinking about like, okay, what is that customer interaction going to be? Like in your production, you can get so into that mode, if you've never worked on that side of it, of your wine and your story, and it's all so interesting, and you have to be passionate about it. You have to be lost in it. But it is really good also if you can put yourself in the mindset of the person who has to then go and sell the wine, and helping them out with a story and good information, and something that's a little bit different, and maybe it's interesting packaging too, or it's something that is made a little differently. And yeah, I went from that job to briefly working as a sales rep, and then I really felt like, oh man, like I feel like everyone should probably not everyone should be a sales rep. I think like I certainly was not super cut out for it, but I think that experience of having to walk in and talk to a buyer, and they don't necessarily care what you have to say, they don't necessarily have time for you, like having being on both sides of that table really humbled me, and I will never forget that experience.
So you mentioned, obviously, besides sort of looking for Cab Francs that you were so excited about, what else were you looking for as you built a wine list? You mentioned, obviously, the customer experience, and you're sort of thinking down the line, but what were you looking for as you were building wines? What kind of wines excited you? What kind of stories excited you?
Oh, I have always been really interested in unique regional grapes, people who are trying to kind of revive maybe indigenous grapes of the region, people who are trying to, because of getting my start in the Niagara Escarpment, I have always been a real believer in small up and coming regions. I love to be a champion when somebody is doing something that I think really is great. I can't count how many times in my life I've made somebody blind taste something that I was pretty sure, like, if they saw the label, they probably would have, prejudices about it. But I loved bringing that to customers. It was a neighborhood of big fun reds. We had like wines that I wasn't as familiar with before from the Central Coast that were really exciting and cool. And it was, a really good time for me to, I mean, the Chicago market's amazing. I hadn't worked in a market that big before, and having access to everything, I was able to see like, oh, you know, this is what is coming out of, for example, I mentioned California again because, to be quite honest, when I was working in Niagara, I didn't drink a lot of California wine. It was kind of the big bad California, you know, like it felt a little bit too easy to like California wine, and we were all, you know, like Michigan, New York, like Vermont, Maryland, and I really started to fall in love with the beautiful, great wines of California, and I saw why my customers loved them. I saw why they were so thrilling to them. This also coincided with me going to Napa for the first time, so that was probably not a coincidence that I was able to see like, oh yeah, no, they're also like really cool winemakers, you know, who are really passionate about what they do. You know, I maybe had some stereotypes as a young person about what Napa was going to be like, but yeah, I would say those are the big themes for me.
So before coming to Portland, what were your impressions of Oregon wine?
I loved it. I remember, so the larger retailer I worked at Western New York, Premier, we got the Wine Spectator magazines, we had all the back issues, and I remember, so this was in 2009, reading the coverage of the 2007 vintage, which was pretty panned. The writers were kind of, you know, don't bother with this vintage. And I read it, and you know, coming from a cool climate region with really, you know, challenging weather sometimes, I was kind of like, that seems like a generalization. Like, I bet that's not true across the board. And I kind of just put it in the back of my mind, but it made me start being interested in Oregon wine. And actually the first nice bottle I ever purchased was Archery Summit. It was a gift from my professor in college, who was also my thesis advisor. And he was my favorite professor, and I found out that he and his wife were wine drinkers, so I went and bought Archery Summit wine for them. And I was like, I heard this is good. And he was like, yeah, I think it is. And so it always was kind of on the radar for me. And then in Madison, my tasting group was very centered around this great wine shop called Square. It's right downtown in Madison. I have to give it a shout out. It's one of the best wine shops in America, in my opinion. And Andrea Hilsey, the owner, was very connected. She had been to Pinot Camp. She was very connected with Oregon. And she had some really incredible producers, and so at our tasting groups, I would start to taste Beaufrère and let's see, even some of the older, like they had some library vintages of Domaine Serene, White Rose with all of their different oak programs, and I was just really floored by the quality, by the beauty. I was already a Pinot Noir lover. We did Pinot Noir in Niagara, and before I came to Oregon, my wine geek friends and I would kind of joke a little bit disparagingly about Pinot that, you know, if you're drinking a lot of Pinot, you're usually broke and disappointed. I think, you know, I love Pinot Noir. It is certainly true on the market. If you are just getting into wine, you know, trying to figure out what you're going to buy in the Pinot realm, it's not always easy to get like a bottle that you're really happy with what you paid and you're really happy with the quality. I think there is a little bit of a barrier to entry of knowledge with Pinot Noir. I don't think people really get that who have only lived here, because we are just surrounded by fantastic Pinot, and especially if you came up in the industry here, like you're getting to taste great Pinot for free all of the time. That's just not true in the rest of the market. And before I came here, I definitely felt like Pinot was an interesting and beautiful grape, certainly a very challenging one, sometimes challenging to love, but certainly challenging to make and grow. And I came out here first just on a visit. I had a partner who was living out here at the time, and I visited some properties that I was representing, and I was just floored by the quality, the overall standard of quality, just being able to go around and taste, you know, at 10 different places and taste all these incredible bottles of wine. And I was just, you know, pretty rapidly falling in love with Oregon, just kind of from visiting these producers. And I was kind of like, well, you know, my partner lives here. I really kind of miss working on the production side. I mentioned I wasn't super cut out to be a sales rep. Sometimes I think you just need to like, I call it hitting like with a Nintendo, like when you look at your career, you kind of like pop it out, blow on it, pop it back in. Like I think the way to do that in the wine world is
nobody here is going to get that. Only you and me are going to get that.
This is, yeah, kids, this is how we used to fix a Nintendo. You would just pop it out, blow the dust off, pop back in, and then it worked. And sometimes I think you need to do that with your life. And I think with wine people, that is working a harvest. I hadn't worked a harvest in a while at this point. I missed it. And in August of 2017, I saw a harvest job opportunity. I applied for it. 2 hours later, the winemaker called me and was like, we actually want to fill this quickly. Like it's, you know, we had someone, we lost somebody, so like we need to like get this going. And I resigned my job and then threw everything in my car and was out here 2 weeks later. So it all was a very like impulsive decision, but it was because of Pinot.
So what was that harvest experience like?
It was amazing. So this was at Alexana. It was fantastic.
Was that Brian?
Weil, yeah, wonderful winemaker, wonderful guy. He told me on the phone that Alexana was really interested in creating an educational harvest experience at Alexana for his interns, and that's absolutely true. Brian really makes an effort to bring teaching into it, to make sure that you're not just working the same job, you know, for 3 months. You're getting to try everything and getting to move around the winery and learn about why these decisions are being made. He's extremely open about, you know, his process. He's a master blender. Alexana works with a lot of different small lots, and so you get to be part of that process. I can't say enough about it as an experience. I fell in love with Oregon. I worked my butt off. I met a lot of really good friends, and I continue to think Alexana is making great wine, and I am really, really happy that that's where I got my start here. I think, you know, there's not every harvest experience is a great one, and I think out here, generally speaking, there are a lot of wineries that are really focused on the educational side for their interns, and I think that's wonderful. He took us out tasting too, so we got to meet a lot of people that way. It was nice.
So with that kind of a quick decision and coming out for harvest, what did you think beyond that?
I was not sure if I was going to stay in Oregon when I came out. The plan was I'm going to work a harvest. I actually had most of my stuff still in Chicago in a storage unit. I had thrown things into my Honda Accord, drove out here, and I did not have a plan for after harvest. I think I was kind of like, okay, well, 50-50, I'll come back to Chicago, or I'll stay out here, not really sure. And it became quickly very clear that not only was this a great place with wonderful people, there were a lot of job opportunities. I had never been somewhere with such a big established wine region where, for example, people recognized my WSET credentials and were, you know, they recognized that like that made me an attractive candidate, where you could go and get like a full-time job that was a good job in the wine industry. And again, you don't have to be somebody's child, you know, to do that. I had never been anywhere where I felt like I had so many opportunities in front of me. And so that made it a pretty easy decision to stay. And I think I posted on Facebook like, hey, here's some things I like doing. Like, you know, if you guys want to, like, if you know anyone who needs this person, then that's me. And that ended up being the best cover letter I ever wrote, because I ended up getting to meet some really cool people through that. And then Morgan, who I actually knew from the Finger Lakes, Morgan McLaughlin at WVWA, sent me a message because we had stayed in touch for the last 10 years or so. And she said, you know, looks like you also fell in love with Oregon. I did too. Welcome out here, and we could maybe use some help in the office, so come by sometime.
And what did that lead to?
So I started out part-time at the WVWA. I was also working at a restaurant at the time, and I'm also really a huge fan of beer. This was a place where they had a really good tap list, and so I was diving into the beer side of Oregon too. But it really was a good fit at the WVWA. There was a lot of things that I enjoy doing that were needed. It's always been a pretty small team, but it became, I think, within the next year a full-time thing, and it's been just the best way I can imagine to to meet this community and serve this community and kind of give back to the production side and like the industry that I love so much. I think it's not really giving back because I'm not volunteering, it's a job, but it does kind of feel like we are, we're all wearing so many hats all the time, and just trying to do our best to be there for our members, that it feels good. It feels like purposeful work, which was, I think, something that I felt like I might need to give up a little bit when I went into wine, and that's not the case at all.
So tell me about your kind of as you entered the WVWA, what was it working on at the time? What were the kind of the challenges, and what were the roles you set out to sort of fill in the next few years?
So the WVWA was at a point of transition at that time. So Sue Horstman retired. She was the previous executive director. Morgan came to fill the executive director role. And as I mentioned, I had known her from when she did that role in the Finger Lakes. So I already knew that she had an amazing leadership style and a great vision. And I knew that it was an exciting time to come on board. I'm trying to remember. It's a crazy job. Like, there's always something going on. It is just the most different things happening at once. And I think, that's really, I feel really lucky that I spent 5 years in a job where every day was different, and there were needs from our very small members, and there were needs from our members who are, very big, and they have their own whole marketing teams, and it was figuring out what are the best ways to fill all of those needs and speak for all of those people, and bring the region forward. And it was pretty special to be able to work and for and represent and eventually kind of become like one of the voices of a region that is so associated with high quality. It was almost like the job wasn't easy, but that part of it was made so easy by the fact that anywhere we went, people were like, oh, Willamette Valley, amazing wine, beautiful, great Pinot Noir. I was like, yep, yeah, you got it. Exactly. It was really spectacular. I was able to do a lot of traveling. At the time, we were really ramping up the Pinot in the City program, where we would go on the road and do Pinot Noir events and seminars in like Chicago and Houston, and it was really, really fun. And then of course, like the auction was getting bigger each year, and it was and then of course Oregon Pinot Camp. So it was just so exciting. There was so much going on all the time, and it was really a moment of it felt like a lot of energy and a lot of forward momentum at the time. Of course, I have nothing to compare it to. I wasn't, I haven't been in this region that long, but it felt like a really cool time to be there.
So give us an example of some of the projects you worked on, or some of the kind of initiatives, just to give us an idea of what the WVWA kind of focuses on.
Sure. So I have to bring my brain pre-COVID because, of course, a lot of things changed, but I mentioned the road events we did. We also did things like SomCon, TechSom, Minnesota Food Wine Experience, where a lot of times either I would support somebody like Elaine Brown or Bree Stock MW doing a masterclass, or a couple times I got to teach, which was really fun, and spread the good word of Willamette Valley wine around the country. We were able to do events here. There was like Feast, for example. It was really neat, and that's those are opportunities to kind of do the more sort of fun marketing side of things. Like I love the deep education, but there is also something to be said for like Portland having a food festival. We're going to show up with like gorgeous glamping tents that like our incredible designer Courtney Cunningham sort of laid out and created for us. I should probably not drop my mic. So those were kind of like the event side on the smaller scale, and then of course the auction was bringing trade out to the Willamette Valley to show them around, show them a great experience, have an educational event for them, and also raise funds for everything that we were trying to do. And then Oregon Pinot Camp was just about to celebrate its 20th anniversary, and I already knew that it was an iconic event in the industry, so it was about kind of just taking it a little bit more to the next level each year. There was the day-to-day was everything from, just making sure our website was a great resource for the public, because a lot of what we do is, consumers want to come out to the Valley, they need great information. They need all of it to be in one place. They need to be able to plan their trip. And that led into the development of a new website, which we've had now for about a year. It's been really awesome. I got to do a lot of the writing for the site, and I got to watch, kind of from start to finish, the transition of, changing our entire digital ecosystem, which was pretty crazy. And making sure that if people are looking for anything about Willamette Valley wine, about Oregon Pinot Noir, that they can come to us for accurate facts and figures, which I research and try to keep updated all the time. And see what wineries have sustainability certifications, and where can I stay, and where can I eat, and what other things can I do, and can I bring my kids, my pets, all of these things. We really wanted to try to make our members as visible to the public as we possibly could. And that's what we've been trying to do. And then, of course, the pandemic ended the roadshow and travel piece of things, and became very much about making sure that our members have all the support they need to sell wine virtually, to sell curbside, to get people out for, kind of drive-through, and to get people's, club events, like make sure that everything is super visible on our site, and make sure that people have, a place to talk, like just be creating space for discussions between national sales managers, between tasting room managers, Emotional support is a really big part of, what makes a community strong, and it was really important to us to create venues for those conversations and candid conversations about, how everything was going. And then, of course, with there's wildfires, frost, it was really important to have infrastructure in place to just, be able to have members get the resources they need. Of course, Oregon Wine Board is amazing with giving industry education and connecting people with great researchers, and making sure they have the technical information that they need, and working with them has been super important. But yeah, there's a little bit of trying to be the secretary, the janitor, the guidance counselor, the hype man, and we try to succeed at all those things. I think it's a constant work in progress.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up 2020 there. So I know for a couple of we'll talk about the kind of the global part of 2020 first, and then your personal part of 2020. Tell me about how you saw the industry handle 2020. What were the biggest sort of moments for you, and either for you personally or for things you saw during 2020 that kind of helped the industry get through?
I loved seeing people's support for each other. I loved seeing people come together and make hand sanitizer, or donate wine to essential or give wine to essential workers to thank them, and take care of their staff and share resources. I loved seeing that Salud was so strong in helping our vineyard stewards, stay healthy and stay informed of COVID information as it came through, because there was about a year, and I mean, it's still the case, but man, early in the pandemic, the amount of information changing coming from, our government officials, it was really, really tough. And it felt like we were constantly, I felt like I was updating the website every single day with new guidelines, new restrictions, making sure our consumers knew what to expect, trying to support our hospitality people. And I think that, it was really inspiring to me to see how many people out in the market wanted to buy Oregon wine. I had so many friends, family, and also just people on social media, just say hey, I want to buy some wine. I want to support, whoever. Sometimes people just sent it to me. They knew I was studying, and they were like, hey, I don't need any more wine. I've bought a lot of wine, but I want to support these wineries, so I'm just sending it to you. And that really showed me how much people love Oregon, how much people love our community. And so that was really cool. I was really touched by how strong we are all, together. And I know that that's a kind of a cliche, but it felt like maybe not every region would have had that strength. So I felt lucky there.
And obviously, the harvest of 2020 brought its own challenges as well. How did the WVA and how did what was your role in that?
It was super important for us to make sure everybody in our membership had as much information as we could possibly find, whether, from scientists, from other regions who had also dealt with this, from, OWB was, we worked with them on these, just making sure that people could access information quickly and ask questions. We're not the first region to deal with wildfires. We certainly won't be the last, and unfortunately, this is going to become part of the conversation more and more with climate change, and it is so helpful to have the knowledge coming out of California and Australia, where we can, invite those people to a webinar, or they can send us emails filled with information, and that's fantastic. It was also really important to help customers understand that you can't generalize about a vintage in a region as big as the Willamette Valley. I mean, if you're going to take seriously, and this is for the trade and consumers, if you're going to take seriously the idea of microclimate and site specificity, and this block is called this because it does this thing, and this block faces east and it does this, and we pick these blocks 2 weeks apart because of these differences. If you're going to take seriously all of these little nuances that we love about terroir, you cannot turn around and say, okay, well, the entire vintage was this in a 3.5 million acre region. And it was important to us that whether people decided to not make wine, whether they decided to make wine, whether they decided to pick and then make the decision later, that they were supported, and that we didn't have consumers hearing like, oh, well, I heard this about the whole region, or I'm just not going to, buy the wine, or something like that. It's a challenge. It really is. You want people to have good information, and in a year where you have an unprecedented situation, sometimes that information's not there yet. I would give the example of the frost this year as well. Sometimes, the media wants answers right away, right now. What does it all mean? And the reality is that we will know at harvest. We will know, maybe at crop estimates. Wine takes a long time. The industry, runs on a cycle of an entire year, and in terms of vine health, several years, and there's just some things that you have to wait and see on. And I think that it is a really good time to trust consumers and the trade. I think now is a really good time for us as an industry to take a leadership role in helping consumers understand, this is why, this wine might, maybe somebody would choose not to make wine in this year because of this thing that happened. And this person did make wine, and they were able to, to address some of the issues, or this person made wine and it tastes, like every other year. Helping consumers understand these nuances is possible, and it's good. I think it's a noble pursuit. And the consumer wants authenticity. They want a real story. They want to know where their food comes from. They want to know where their wine comes from. And I think that we can trust them perhaps more than maybe some people realize, and not underestimate them. That was a little bit of a side rant about
It's much appreciated. So at the same time, you mentioned the MW as something that had been foretold earlier on. So what made you decide it was time to dive into the MW?
I had finished my diploma, which is a pretty hard prerequisite for MW. And I had friends who had either started the program or were applying to the program. And so it was something that we all talked about together, and it was sort of a question of when rather than if at that point. I have a dear friend, Kim Oshiro, who had started the program, and I think she was really encouraging about applications open, and I was very lucky to have the encouragement of Bree Stock MW as well. We're really lucky to have her here in Oregon in general, and I was very lucky that she has been incredibly encouraging of me pursuing this goal. So I had those things. I had the support of my family. I think you can't overstate that, because I think when you have a situation where you're trying to explain to a partner, perhaps young children, that you're going to have a lot less time and they don't really get it, I think that is really challenging. My partner is an academic, so he definitely gets it. My family has been incredibly supportive. My work has been supportive. Morgan encouraged this. She was an incredible boss throughout the whole process of applying and starting out in the program. And it was the right time. There's only so many times in your life when all of those things are kind of coming together. And yeah, it felt right.
So how has the process gone so far?
So it's tough to do this in the pandemic. It's tough to do most things in a pandemic. The MW program is very much, I think, the fire that gets lit with everybody who stays in this program is the networking and the community and the like-minded people that you meet, and the amazing MWs who go out of their way to help us. And it is really, really hard to access that from a Zoom screen. So I think I'm just really, really grateful that now we've been able to get back to some in-person events, and it's just been spectacular. I have learned so much. I really feel like every single day that I'm in this program, I'm a better person for it. And I've always told myself, if the day ever comes when the only value to me is passing the exam and getting the credentials, then that's the day that I walk away, because I want it to be bringing value to me every day and not just a sunk cost situation. And yeah, it's been amazing, one of the best experiences of my life. And at this point now, I've made some really good friends in the program, and it's one of my dear friends, Samantha Cole Johnson, another of your interviewees and very important person in Oregon, is in the program as well. And so it's great to have people that you can vent to. So yeah, it has gotten way better since things have kind of opened up again.
So take us through the timeline then. What are the kind of milestones along the way? What have you done and what is to come? Yeah,
so it's structured a little bit like law school with first stage, second stage, third stage. So I'm a stage 1 MW student. The stage 1 kind of the way that you get to stage 2 is an exam of 12 wines blind and then 2 essay questions. So practical and theory, just like the big exam. Should you pass through that, you get into stage 2, and then the exam is the one that most people have heard of if they've heard of this program, which is the 4-day, there's 5 different theory papers, there's 3 flights of 12 blind wines. It's quite a gauntlet, actually. And you don't it's a little unusual to pass them both at the same time and to pass them on the first try. So that stage tends to take a little bit of time. Some people do just kind of step in, collect the paperwork and walk out, and they've got their MW in 3 years, but that's unusual. Mm-hmm. And once you've gotten your practical and your theory passed, doesn't have to be together, you move on to the research paper, which is a deep dive into a topic that you find really fascinating. Hopefully you still find it fascinating at the end. Just like a PhD dissertation, you might get through a phase where you just don't want anyone to ask you about it. Mm-hmm. But that is meant to be something that is measurable and very easy to kind of break down into something that you can really study. So ideally not like a philosophical question, why are we all here? Why is wine good? Can wine ever be, objectively good? And more something like, what are the markers of success for this stage of the industry with this specific group, or what is, this chemical do in wine? What is this chemical doing in wine? Things like that. It's very technical, and I'm really looking forward to it, honestly. It feels like a long way away because I'm in stage 1, but knock on wood, I'll get to that phase at some point, and you do have to have that proposal ready to go when you sit the big exam, because if you pass, you got to get going. You don't really have a lot of time to take a break. It's time to get that research paper started.
So I know that in addition to your day job, you also have your fingers in a lot of things in the Valley. So tell me about some of the other kind of projects or things you've worked on while here, in addition to the WVWA stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about this Valley is everybody's doing a lot of different things. So I did get my Wct Teacher Certification in the last couple of years, actually right before the pandemic, which was really a bummer because I really love teaching, and I was for a while teaching Wct at Linfield, and then with the start of the pandemic, there was just no in-person teaching, which is completely, it's exactly how it was supposed to be, but I do miss it. I always enjoy teaching a lot. And then I have done some tasting and also just kind of helped out a little bit with my friend Ian Burrows over at RE Vintners. I'm not sure if you've interviewed him yet, but I'm sure, yeah. That doesn't surprise me. And he's super connected in the Valley as well, so it's been really great to make friends with him and also just spend some time over there and get a little bit of that harvest work that I really enjoy. Let's see, I do a lot of, I've done a lot of kind of tasting group situations. I feel like it's really cool here that you can have multiple different kinds of tasting groups. There's that many people who are interested in furthering their knowledge and their study. I've had tasting groups that were very WSET specific, where it's a couple students who are about to sit and maybe I'm doing a flight for them, or back when I was doing diploma, people were really supportive of me and doing just super specific to the exam. And I've had tasting groups where it's more, let's break down like the winemaking and kind of more like production focused. And I have some people who I've been tasting with who are really supportive of my MW journey, and they maybe want to do the process someday, but they aren't in it yet. So that's kind of the various, I feel like it sounds like I only do wine. But in terms of the industry, those are a few of the things that I've been involved in. And yeah, with COVID, of course, it made it a little bit harder to get around, but I do try to visit tasting rooms as much as I can.
I know you only do wine. You can't fool me.
Guilty. See, I drank cider one time.
Before we get on to kind of sort of future stuff, I'm curious about, we talked about OPC off camera briefly, obviously just wrapping up 2022.
Yes.
Tell us about OPC 2022 a little bit and sort of, for historical context, why it was such a big deal this year.
Oh, it was so nice to get back. So we had to cancel Oregon Pinot Camp 2 years in a row because of the pandemic. We had never canceled camp. It was the 20th anniversary of the first camp in 2019, and so we had to cancel what would have been our 20th camp, and it's a little bit weird. It's like how your first birthday is, like the day you're born is not your first birthday, and so we had to cancel twice in a row, and we were really like heartbroken because there is really no Oregon Pinot Camp that's not in person. It is inherent to the program that we bring the trade here to see and feel and taste and experience, diurnal shift of I needed a hoodie and now I need sunscreen, and and really have those moments with winemakers that are unscripted, And so it was such a joy to come back for this year and to be able to finish up my time here with one more OPC. It went really, really well. We had, for the first time, Megan Markle, my coworker, who I believe you interviewed recently, as our camp manager. She was new to it this year and it did a beautiful job. It was really awesome. And it just felt really, really good to do this in-person event and have all of these campers get to experience this after so long. A lot of them are, restaurant and on-premise, and, just the relief of having, those places still in business and still thriving, and everybody coming through on the other side of this huge obstacle in our industry was really special.
So you mentioned, you kind of, spoiler alert there, that your time in Oregon is wrapping up. So tell us about the future for you, what's coming next, and sort of short-term and long-term?
Yeah, so I am doing kind of a weird couple of things coming up. I have my Master of Wine Stage 1 exam in July. That's going to be in Napa. I am going to then drive across the country to spend the rest of the year in Newark. I have a really good situation there where my partner has an apartment in Newark, and then I can go to a tasting group in New York City, and there's a great MW International Wine Center there, and there's just a lot of amazing wine and wine bars. I mean, the market is pretty unbeatable in the US for what you can buy, and also just in terms of events for education, for trade education. So it's a really good time to be there, and also I've been long distance with my partner for 4 years, so it was about time to go in and join him there. And there's only so many times a year when you can get off the WVWA train and not leave the team hanging, because we are a very, very busy team. We are always full throttle. So right after OPC was one of those times where I felt like it's not gonna be too difficult for the team. So. That's the short term, and I'm going to be doing kind of a different thing that getting back into something that I used to do, which is a lot more freelance work. I really love doing writing and education materials and research and things like that. So I will still be working with the WVWA on some of their education stuff. I'm also going to be working with some wineries, some wine brands on various freelance work. So I'm really excited about that. I think, being able to kind of pick my projects for a little while, do something a little bit different, will also allow me to have time to study, but it still allows me to kind of stay connected to the industry, and especially the industry here, and just kind of stretch out a little bit. It's been a wonderful 5 years at WVWA, but this is an exciting new challenge.
So with that, the ability to kind of focus on the MW stuff, assuming that goes kind of as you plan, what do you what's next? What would you like to do if that were finished, if that were in your rearview mirror? What would be next?
Well, my passion is education. I love teaching. I love helping people connect better with wine, whether it's people in the trade or WSET students or even consumers. I love teaching the public. In Chicago, I actually had a side gig doing private tastings occasionally in people's homes, and I could just customize classes to whatever they wanted to learn. And I think I envision doing something with that, whether it's having my own education center or working in one, and partnering with some really great organization. I think that is kind of where I'm happiest. I love to write, so I think that's always going to be part of the mix. I think I haven't thought too much more, that hasn't come into focus too much more than that, just because the whole get through the MW is kind of
no problem.
Kind of a big one. So that's the short-term goal, is just really try to thrive in this program, and again, knock on wood that I come out on the other side of it with the pen.
So we talked earlier about your sort of initial impressions of Oregon wine. I'm curious, from those first impressions to now, especially having been so immersed in it, what are the biggest changes you've seen, especially in the Valley, and what does the industry look like in 2022?
I mean, the growth has been extraordinary. I'm not saying anything new here, but just since I've been here, it's pretty insane. I think we had 30% increase in wineries in the Willamette Valley. The growth in sparkling wine, the growth in Chardonnay, it's really quite extraordinary. And I'm just as excited about the industry here as I was when I got here. I still think that this is one of the coolest places in the world for wine. I think that quality is only getting better. The wineries are developing their digital skills and learning more about just the business side of it, and kind of developing to that level, because this is a region full of really small businesses, and I think that piece of it coming into its own is really exciting as well. It's definitely a time of, big changes. Of course, everybody, people, whenever there's a merger and acquisition, people really, have a lot of feelings about that, and they should. It's important that these changes be really thoughtful, and I don't have a feeling of like, oh no, this is the end if things like that happen, because I see the benefits of really connected, really knowledgeable, high-skilled businesses coming here. I think that there's something to be said for that. But of course, there's always going to be that anxiety. I just keep having gravity. There's a lot of gravity in here.
A lot of gravity.
Yeah. I keep seeing, I see anxiety, and I think it's natural about Oregon staying Oregon. I'm sure that, when people think about like what Napa has become in terms of the incredible level of wealth and, and money involved, I think that sometimes people get nervous. Well, that's just not, you can't have every region be Napa. Like Napa embraces their luxury image. There are plenty of people who are in Napa who don't embrace it, and they do just fine. But Napa has that as part of its identity. It didn't happen by accident. Mm-hmm. And I think Oregon will always be Oregon. I think Laurent Montalieu says this a lot. He says, don't worry about being Oregon staying Oregon. Oregon's going to stay Oregon. He always says, we worry about this all the time, and it's going to be fine. Like Oregon is Oregon, and you can't change it. And I think it's really exciting, and it's going to be interesting to see how we continue to attract talent, young people who want to be in the wine industry, who want to pursue this life the way that I did, because the pandemic brought such a hit to hospitality staffing, and it was, I'm not talking about just Oregon right now, I'm talking about the entire country. It was challenging to convince people to come to work in environments where, often you might deal with belligerent customers, or there's a risk of getting sick. And I think we have to stay competitive with showing people how cool this region is, how much we take care of each other, making sure that professional development and long-term investment in your employees is part of the package, I think is going to be really important. I'm not worried about that. I think it is happening and will continue to happen. But I think that is really a critical thing to not lose sight of.
So as you look ahead for the industry, then what do you see happening next?
I certainly see more sparkling wine. I feel like the demand seems to be there, and people are really interested in it. I think there's been a lot of talk and interest in grape varieties that are alternative grape varieties. I don't think Pinot's going anywhere. I think we make fantastic Pinot here. We will continue to make fantastic Pinot, but I think it's also really exciting to see these new and interesting grapes coming into a bottle, and some of the new ones being planted. I don't know how. I don't know if I feel comfortable making projections that are like super specific about economic growth, because I'm not an expert, but it does seem like there's quite a bit of room to grow in the valley. I mean, if you look at how the South Valley there's quite a bit of distance between wineries. That's a beautiful, beautiful part of the valley, and it's just not as densely planted at this point, but that doesn't mean it won't be. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how the development of a couple new South Valley AVAs will bring more interest and investment, and that's super exciting as well.
If someone were to ask you for your words of wisdom or your advice on getting into the Oregon wine industry, what would you tell them? This is such a great industry for networking. I feel like if people sense that you are a hard worker and that you're real, they're gonna stick up for you and find opportunities for you. That's certainly my experience. I felt that, in terms of job opportunity and job networking, it was not a challenge. It was almost easier than anywhere else I've ever worked, because
having done a harvest, I had, the friends that I worked harvest with, and of course Brian, and the Alexana team. And I think once you have, that couple of months of like just starting to kind of meet other producers and learn the region, if people sense that you're here to work and that you're here to stay, I think, at least for a little while, I think that people do want to help each other. There is a desire to get good people into the industry here, and that's great. I think if you can work a harvest, that is an awesome way to get a start here. If you don't have any harvest experience, certainly if you have some sort of like restaurant back of house experience or something where you can show that you can work really hard, that you've been in the trenches, that helps for sure. If not, if you can try to do some sort of internship. We've gotten more, in the last couple of years, I've been encouraged to see more kind of apprenticeships, internships, especially diversity initiatives. I think those are really great ways to bring people out here and make sure that they are supported. We have to make sure that there is a pathway for them after that internship is over where they're still supported. But yeah, I think there's a lot of really good opportunities to just come out here and get a job. Like it's kind of amazing how many opportunities there are. And I think my biggest advice would be to just be super reliable, because this is the West Coast. I think people value, don't be too casual. I think sometimes people come out here and it's like, oh, I'm gonna come out here and just relax and find myself. That's great, relax and find yourself. But I think people really appreciate reliability here. I would say don't lose sight of that. I think that would be all of it. All my advice.
Don't find yourself too much is what you're saying.
Yeah, don't find yourself too much. Yeah, it's good. I think coming from the Rust Belt, coming out here, you definitely feel like, man, everybody's so happy all the time. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong with these people? After a few years, you start saying things like, oh, he's on his own journey, and your Rust Belt family makes fun of you. I think that this is a very real and very hardworking industry, and it's definitely, I have seen a couple of people who come out here, and I think they might be just on summer camp in their minds. And I think come here with the attitude of hard work, and you'll be rewarded.
All right, that's all the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that you would like to cover?
I don't think so. I'm so flattered. You're such an institution. I've listened to so many of you and the team. I have listened to so many of your interviews, and it is such a treasure to have this in our industry. I can't tell you the number of times I've sent them to media or consumers, or just shared them on our made sure that they're linked from our website. I just really love that resource. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very nice to hear. I've never been called an institution before. That's very, very flattering. Thank you so much for your time today, and again, thank you to Stuart and Athena for letting us use their amazing space here.
Yes.
And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.